The most illustrious Order of St. Patrick is a dormant British order of chivalry associated with Ireland. The order was created in 1783 by George III at the request of the then Lord Lieutenant, Lord Buckingham. The regular creation of Knights of St. Patrick lasted until 1922, when most of Ireland became independent as the Irish Free State. While the order technically still exists, no Knight of St. Patrick has been created since 1936, and the last surviving knight, Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester, died in 1974. The Queen, however, remains the sovereign of the order, and one officer, the Ulster King of Arms, also survives. St. Patrick is patron of the order. Its motto is Qui separa bene, Latin for "who will separate," an allusion to the Vulgate translation of Romans chapter 8 verse 35, "Who shall separate us from the love of Christ?" Most British orders of chivalry cover the entire kingdom, but the three most exalted ones each pertain to one constituent nation only. The Order of St. Patrick, which pertains to Ireland, is the most junior of these three in precedence and age. Its equivalent in England, the most noble Order of the Garter, is the oldest order of chivalry in the United Kingdom, dating to the middle 14th century. The Scottish equivalent is the most ancient and most noble Order of the Thistle, dating in its modern form to 1687. History. Early history. The order was founded in 1783, a year after the grant of substantial autonomy to Ireland, as a means of rewarding political support in the Irish Parliament. The Order of the Bath, founded in 1725, was instituted for similar reasons. The statutes of the order restricted membership to men who were both knights and gentlemen, the latter being defined as having 3 generations of noblesse on both the father's and mother's side. In practice, however, only Irish peers were ever appointed to the order. The Cross of St. Patrick was chosen as one of the symbols of the order. A flag of this design was later incorporated into the Union flag. Its association with St. Patrick with Ireland prior to the foundation of the order is unclear. However, one of the first knights was the second Duke of Leinster, whose arms carried the same cross. The Order of St. Patrick earned international coverage when, in 1907, its insignia, known generally as the Irish Crown Jewels, were stolen from the Bedford Tower in Dublin Castle shortly before a visit by the order's sovereign, King Edward VII. The whereabouts remain a mystery. The last non-royal appointed to the order was James Hamilton, 3rd Duke of Abercorn in 1922, who served as the first governor of Northern Ireland. When the Irish Free State left the United Kingdom that same year, the Irish Executive Council under W.T. Cosgrave chose to make no further appointments to the order. The British government continued to entertain hopes for the order's revival as a pan-Irish institution. Therefore, while there was no legal or constitutional bar to the British government continuing to make appointments from among British subjects resident in Northern Ireland, it chose not to do so. Since then, only 3 people have been appointed to the order, all members of the British royal family. The then Prince of Wales was appointed in 1927 and his younger brothers, Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester, in 1934 and Prince Albert, Duke of York, in 1936. It is likely that these appointments were considered possible because the Irish Free State continued to recognise the British monarch as its official head of state. In 1937, however, the Irish Free State adopted a new constitution, rendering the Crown's position in Irish affairs ambiguous. The ambiguity was resolved 12 years later when the Irish Free State formally declared itself a republic and left the British Commonwealth. The basis for such appointments thus ceased, and no further ones have been made. The Duke of Gloucester, at his death in 1970, 1824 was the last surviving member of the Order. The last living non-royal member of the Order, the 9th Earl of Shaftesbury, died in 1961. The Order has, however, never actually been abolished, and its resurrection has been discussed in Irish government circles on a number of occasions and never pursued. Possible revival. Prime Minister Winston Churchill suggested reviving the Order in 1943 to recognize the services of General Leon Sir Harold Alexander in Tunisia, but the opinion of the other ministers and civil servants was that it would upset the diplomatic balance between London and Dublin. Taoiseach Sean Lemass considered reviving the Order during the 1960s, but did not take a decision. The Constitution of Ireland provides, titles of nobility shall not be conferred by the state, and no title of nobility or of honour may be accepted by any citizen except with the prior approval of the government. Legal experts are divided on whether this clause prohibits the awarding of membership of the Order of St. Patrick to Irish citizens, but some suggest that the phrase titles of nobility implies hereditary peerages and other noble titles, not lifetime honours such as knighthoods. In any case, an Irish citizen would require the approval of the Government of Ireland to receive an award from a reigning monarch of the United Kingdom. In this manner, composition. Members. The British monarch is sovereign of the Order of St. Patrick. The Lord Lieutenant of Ireland, the monarch's representative in Ireland, served as the Grand Master. The office of Lord Lieutenant was abolished in 1922. The last Lord Lieutenant and Grand Master was the first Viscount Fitzalan of Derwent. Rather oddly, the statutes of the Order did not provide that the Grand Master be admitted to the Order as a matter of right. While some Lords Lieutenant were in fact appointed to the Order, this seems to have been the exception rather than the rule. The Order originally consisted of 15 knights in addition to the sovereign. In 1821, however, George IV appointed 6 additional knights. He did not issue a royal warrant authorizing the change until 1830. William IV formally changed the statutes in 1833, increasing the limit to 22 knights. The original statutes, based heavily on those of the Order of the Garter, prescribed that any vacancy should be filled by the sovereign upon the nomination of the members. Each knight was to propose 9 candidates, of whom 3 had to have the rank of Earl or higher, 3 the rank of Baron or higher, and 3 the rank of Knight or higher, and a vote taken. In practice, the system was never used. The Grand Master would nominate a peer, the sovereign would usually assent, and a chapter meeting held at which the knights elected the new member. The Order of St. Patrick differed from its English and Scottish counterparts, the Orders of the Garter and the Thistle, in only ever appointing peers and princes. Women were never admitted to the Order of St. Patrick. They were not eligible to become members of the other 2 orders until 1987. The only woman to be part of the Order was Queen Victoria, in her capacity as sovereign of the Order, although it was associated with the established Church of Ireland until 1871. Several Roman Catholics were appointed to the Order throughout its history. Offices. The Order of St. Patrick initially had 13 officers: the prelate, the chancellor, the registrar, the usher, the secretary, the genealogist, the king of arms, 2 heralds and 4 pursuivants. Many of these offices were held by clergymen of the Church of Ireland, the then established church. After the disestablishment of the church in 1871, the ecclesiastics were allowed to remain in office until their deaths, when the offices were either abolished or reassigned to lay officials. All offices except that of Registrar and King of Arms are now vacant. The office of Prelate was held by the Lord Archbishop of Armagh, the most senior clergyman in the Church of Ireland. The Prelate was not mentioned in the original statutes but created by warrant shortly afterwards, apparently because the Archbishop at the time had asked to be appointed to the post. Since the death of the last holder in 1885, the office of prelate has remained vacant. The Church of Ireland's second highest cleric, the Lord Archbishop of Dublin, originally served as the Chancellor of the Order. From 1886 onwards, the office was held instead by the Chief Secretary for Ireland. Since the abolition of the position of Chief Secretary in 1922, the office of Chancellor has remained vacant. The Dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral was originally the Registrar of the Order. In 1890, on the death of the Dean who had held the post at the time of disestablishment, the office was attached to that of the King of Arms of the Order. This position was held by Ulster King of Arms, Ireland's chief heraldic official, a post which had been created in 1552. In 1943, this post was in effect divided in two, reflecting the partition of Ireland in the Government of Ireland Act 1920. The position, insofar as it related to Northern Ireland, was combined with that of Norroy King of Arms. The post of Norroy and Ulster King of Arms still exists, and thus continues to hold the offices of Registrar and King of Arms of the Order of St. Patrick. The office of Ulster King of Arms, insofar as it related to the Irish Free State, became the position of Chief Herald of Ireland. The Order of St. Patrick had 6 other heraldic offices, many more than any other British order. The 2 heralds were known as Cork Herald and Dublin Herald. 3 of the 4 pursuivances were entitled. The 4th was held by Athlone Pursuivant, an office founded in 1552. The Usher of the Order was the Usher at Arms named the Black Rod. The Gentleman Usher of the Black Rod in Ireland was distinct from the English officer of the same name, though like his counterpart he had some duties in the Irish House of Lords. The Irish post has been vacant since 1933. The offices of Secretary and Genealogist were originally held by members of the Irish House of Commons. The office of Secretary has been vacant since 1926. The position of genealogist was left vacant in 1885, restored in 1889, but left vacant again in 1930. Current offices and members: Sovereign Elizabeth II. Offices: Registrar and King of Arms Timothy Duke. Members: none. Vestments and accoutrements. For important occasions, such as coronations and investitures of new members of the Order, Knights of St. Patrick wore elaborate vestments. The mantle was a celestial blue robe lined with white silk. The star of the Order was depicted on the left of the mantle. A blue hood was attached to the mantle. The hat of the Order was originally of white satin, lined with blue, but was changed to black velvet by George IV. It was plumed with 3 falls of feathers, 1 red, 1 white and 1 blue. The collar was made of gold, consisting of Tudor roses and harps attached with knots. The 2 roses which comprised the Tudor rose were alternately enameled white within red, and red within white. The central harp, from which the badge of the Order was suspended, was surmounted by a crown. On certain collar days designated by the sovereign, members attending formal events wore the Order's collar over the military uniform. Formal day dress, or evening wear. When collars were worn, the badge was suspended from the collar. Aside from these special occasions, however, much simpler accoutrements were used. The star of the Order was an 8-pointed figure, with the 4 cardinal points longer than the intermediate points. Each point was shown as a cluster of rays. In the center was the same motto, year and design that appeared on the badge. The star was worn pinned to the left breast. The broad reband was a celestial blue sash worn across the body, from the right shoulder to the left hip. The badge was pinned to the reband at the left hip. Made of gold, it depicted a shamrock bearing 3 crowns, on top of a cross of St. Patrick and surrounded by a blue circle bearing the motto in majuscules, as well as the date of the Order's foundation in Roman numerals. The Grandmasters Insignia were of the same form and design as those of the Knights. In 1831, however, William IV presented the Grand Master with a star and badge, each composed of rubies, emeralds and Brazilian diamonds. These two insignia were designated crown jewels in the Order's 1905 statutes, and the designation Irish crown jewels was emphasized by newspapers when they were stolen in 1907. Along with the collars of 5 knights, they have not since been recovered. A number of items pertaining to the Order of St. Patrick are held in museums in both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. The robes of the 4th Baron Clonbrooke, the 122nd Knight of the Order, are on display in the National Museum of Ireland, Dublin. The robe belonging to the 3rd Earl of Kilmorey is held by the Newry Museum, the National Gallery and Genealogical Museum in Dublin. Both have stars of the Order, and the Ulster Museum in Strandmillers has a large collection on display and 2 mantles in storage. The Irish Guards take the capstar and motto from the Order. Chapel and Chancery. The Chapel of the Order was originally in St. Patrick's Cathedral in central Dublin. Each member of the Order, including the Sovereign, was allotted a stall in the choir of the chapel, above which his heraldic devices were displayed. Perched on the pinnacle of a knight's stall was a helm, decorated with mantling and topped by his crest. Above the crest, the knight's heraldic banner was hung, emblazoned with his coat of arms. At a considerably smaller scale, to the back of the stall was affixed a piece of brass displaying its occupant's name, arms and date of admission into the Order. Upon the death of a knight, the banner and crest were taken down and replaced with those of his successor. After the disestablishment of the Church of Ireland in 1871, the chapel ceased to be used. The heraldic devices of the knights at the time were left in place at the request of Queen Victoria. The Order was without a ceremonial home until 1881, when arrangements were made to display banners, helms and hatchment plates in the Great Hall, officially called St. Patrick's Hall, in Dublin Castle. On the establishment of the Irish Free State, the banners of the living knights were removed. When the hall was redecorated in 1962, it was decided that it should be hung with the banners of the members of the Order in 1922. The existing banners were repaired and new ones made. It is these banners which can be seen today. The hall, which was renamed St. Patrick's Hall from its association with the Order, also served as the Chancery of the Order. Installation ceremonies, and later investitures, were held here, often on St. Patrick's Day, until they were discontinued. A banquet for the knights was often held in the hall on the occasion of an installation. St. Patrick's Hall now serves as the location for the inauguration of the President of Ireland. Unlike many of the other British orders, the stall plates do not form a continuous record of the Knights of the Order. There are only 34 stall plates for the 80 or so knights appointed before 1871, and 40 hatchments plates for the 60 knights appointed subsequently. In the case of the stall plates, this was perhaps due to the size, 30 by 36 centimeters. Precedence and Privileges. Since the members of the Order were required to be knights, and in practice had higher rank, many of the privileges of membership were rendered moot. As knights they could prefix "Sir" to the forenames, but the form was never used in speech, as they were referred to by the peerage dignities. They were assigned positions in the order of precedence, but had higher positions by virtue of the peerage dignities. Knights used the post-nominal letters KP. When an individual was entitled to use multiple post-nominal letters, KP appeared before all others, except BT and BTSS, VC, GC, KG, and KT. Knights could encircle their arms with a depiction of the circlet and the collar. The former is shown either outside or on top of the latter. The badge is depicted suspended from the collar. They were also entitled to receive heraldic supporters. This high privilege was, and is, only shared by members of the royal family, peers, knights and ladies of the Garter, knights and ladies of the Thistle, and knights and dames Grand Cross of the junior orders.